Bankman-Fried and his co-conspirators stole billions of dollars from FTX customers. He used that money for his personal benefit, including to make personal investments and to cover expenses and debts of his hedge fund, Alameda Research. And all of this dirty money was used in service of Bankman-Fried's desire to buy bipartisan influence and impact the direction of public policy in Washington.
So that was U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, laying out the DOJ's case against disgraced SBF founder, or rather FTX founder, Sam Bankman-Fried. His office is charging SBF with 8 counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and campaign finance violations. SBF was arrested, you see here, in the Bahamas shortly after those charges were filed on Monday. He's also facing fraud charges being levied by the SEC. The U.S. is now in the process of seeking extradition.
Alina Habba is a defense attorney, managing partner at Habba, Maddow and Associates. Welcome. I know we've spoken to you before about your well-known client, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. But let's talk about SBF today, because he is really in the headlines. Talk to me about these charges. What's he facing? And really, how much time could he be facing?
He could be facing a tremendous amount of time. What Sam did was very much akin to Bernie Madoff. So you get the public trust, you get them to give you money, and then you fraudulently and greedily inherit that money, take it. He was using it to buy crypto and create his own wealth. You're not allowed to do that when investors of any type invest in you and trust that you're going to be doing it for their benefit. He could be facing, much like Bernie Madoff, 150 plus years. Southern District of New York plays no games when it comes to fraud and wire fraud. And if there's overseas issues, which it appears there would be as well, that just exponentially grows the amount of trouble that this man is going to be seeing.
Can we talk about the fringe elements of this? QuickBooks used for a multi-billion-dollar company. He's spoken to news outlets like Forbes, like the New York Times, in this situation, but he did not appear before Congress to appear under oath. How does that play into these cases in terms of getting these a judge's ruling on this in the legal system?
Well, first of all, it brings up a good point. Usually people in this situation that have this kind of power or wealth, they use it to influence politics, policies, or whatever it is their angle is. I don't see anybody in this country anymore that is just strictly rich but not political. And he definitely was one of these actors. Now, him not going in front of Congress, it's not going to make a difference for the Southern District of New York. They're going to have their own testimony. And I can assure you at this point, they've had their own investigation that has carried on for a long time, much like we see with some of my clients. They do this process where they will interview and make sure it's pretty ironclad by the time they bring charges. So it'll move quickly, I think.
What about where all the money went, right? That's the big question. First of all, who was investing, right? Will we find out really who was, and how much were they investing? And then where did it go? How was it all spent?
I hope for the people that were making investments that we actually don't know. I don't care to know if somebody is going to trust Bernie Madoff or something like that. We will hear it. There will be lawsuits. There will be certain things that come up, people that will go to the press. But a person has a right to invest with whoever they want. What happens with him, I want to know everything about. Where is the money? That's a great question. I assume it's overseas. He was in the Bahamas. We understand that there was a lot of cryptocurrency purchased. That's, of course, more difficult to track, but they've been tracking this, I'm sure, for quite some time. It'll come out, but I think at this point the DOJ is going to try and keep it secret so that they can pursue him effectively.
Yeah, we were listening to some of the hearing yesterday with John Ray III, the CEO of FTX, and one of the things he said was that there was $7 billion, and then there was not $7 billion, essentially, $7 or $8 billion disappearing like that. What type of scheme would do that? Would allow money to disappear that quickly? I mean, have we seen something like this? I know we talk a lot about Madoff, but this is different. This is crypto. This is something that's really not regulated. This is something, when you say crypto, people's eyes glaze over and they don't really understand exactly what's going on.
Right, and I think that there was an era where we had this dark web, right? And this exposed a lot of new avenues for some of these individuals that are incredibly intelligent. Somebody like him to be able to get the public trust, he can't be that stupid. So he probably found ways, if I had to guess, through the internet, but it's traceable. And no matter what, whether you're using the dark web, whether you're using cryptocurrency, whatever it is that you're using, it will be traced. Ultimately, he's going to have to answer some questions, and the people around him will fall. That's what happens. The CFO, the COO, they'll go to his bookkeeper. They'll figure it out. I mean, you can't really...
The bookkeeper with QuickBooks.
The QuickBooks for $7 billion.
Right.
Sure, they must have been busy churning.
Right, exactly.
But what about another name that's been floated around? That has to do with the business partner of Alameda Research, the CEO, Caroline Ellison. Do we see her facing legal challenges?
I don't see how anybody right now isn't facing legal challenges that is doing anything or has any political or public persona, to be honest. I think we're seeing with the Twitter files, with a lot of things that are happening in this country, people are ready to start holding people accountable and cleaning up. You can't steal money, you can't be corrupt, and you're not allowed to censor. So all of these things, I think, are tied one and the same. And there's a movement happening right now, right, where we're seeing a lot of this, and people are going to go to jail. And, you know, I'm the first one to ridicule when the DOJ is doing something for political reasons. But when they're not, and when there's real financial harm or real corruption, they need to do what they need to do. That's their job.
Hearing continues today. Alina Habba weighing in on the charges. We do appreciate that. Thanks so much. Good to see you in person.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
No crooked establishment.
None of that twisting the truth.
No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax.
Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think.
They let
me decide.
Newsmax.
real news
For real people.